All right, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I am going to be going into a little recap of a video blog that I posted. I did the video approximately 2 days ago. I will provide the link. I did just an energy update, and this is all relevant to what's unfolding in the world stage. It's relevant to what's unfolding in our bodies. It's relevant to what's unfolding in our time mechanics. And when I get this information that comes in while I'm in walking meditation or writing meditation or meditation in general, silent meditation, whatever it might be, the information comes through and flows in as a word play. And the reason it is a word play is because as I've been guided to look and understand, our words are like tuning to a lower frequency from the higher bandwidths that we're tapping into. Our English language is very limited, has been very limited for the actual discovery of certain dynamics. And the more that I start to look up these words, the more I see how everything is really interconnected and interwoven. So we'll see that as we go through this, and this will help to explain some of the things that I've written and to help us, I wouldn't even say help is the right word, just shed some light on the connectivity and the supercomputer connectivity that we're all accessing. So I will be doing some share screen. This has to do with time travel a little bit. This is going to be a series of 3 or 4 videos. And it also has to do with some of the things that are going on social, political, economic, as well as our own physical body, because everything is micro to macro. And everything I'm about to share is from my own perspective. And I'm still unraveling it. I'm unraveling writings that I did 3 years ago, dreams that I had 6 months ago are now starting to make sense to me. But I've been guided to share this with everybody because I've held back on a lot of the things that I've written because it sounded odd. And then I realized, kind of like me, it sounded so, it was difficult to actually do a video like this and to break it down. So if you're a word nerd, or if you're just interested in seeing kind of a multidimensional aspect on how communication transpires and comes through, this video is for you. Also, it's an energy update as to what's going on with all of those things. So without further ado, I'm just going to share screen briefly, and then I'll come back to this screen in just a minute. And I'm just going into, it's called Real-Time Creators, and this is on my blog. Again, I read it a few days ago. I invite you to go back and listen to that if it's something that interests you, because it's nice to hear the whole thing from beginning to end and hear the flow on how the conversation moves in and out of the dialogue, so to speak. So I named this Real-Time Creators because the gist of this is that we as light workers are creating in real time now versus fake time. And this is going to be a continued video that I will be going into over quite some time. So I'll just go through this first paragraph. It talks about the elements changing. It talks about people coming together in sketchy wisdom. There's an element of surprise in the works and the elementals, if you will, an unmaking in the making. That which has been tightly bound, wound together, has been completely uplifted, unraveled, if you will. And much sketchy wisdom is being righted. There's a gathering, a coming together. This gathering and coming together of witty personalities, matching wits, so to speak, is allowing a higher frequency. So literally, there is an element of surprise in the works, in the elementals. Now, if I just an unmaking in the unmaking, and I'm just going to stop share for just a moment. So the elementals, it's not just, it's our foundational building blocks. From what I keep getting over and over again in the messages I've been getting for over a year now is that our chemical compounds are changing, our bodies are changing, our DNA is unraveling. I write here, that which has been tightly bound, wound together has completely uplifted. So if you look at the coils of DNA that hold all kinds of information, this is coming out, and all of this information, and by the way, this is macro to micro, other way around, but this is happening socially, economically, politically, everything, as within, so without, cosmically. So a lot of what's been kept bound tightly is unraveling because of the spaciousness, the uplifting. And I talk about this in a previous video where if you look at roots in concrete, it uplifts the concrete and then that space expands and we can see what's been underneath there. And essentially we as light workers are filling the gaps. And that's a whole other portion of this video. But the elementals are changing. The elements, our periodic table of elements is different. There are new elements that have been discovered that are being discovered. So if we think the building blocks of matter are based on what we know has just uplifted and expanded. Therefore, the building blocks of matter are actually a lot more than what we knew them to be. Therefore, many witty personalities and people are going to be coming together to study this, to talk about it, and to share. Holy moly, there is way more that's been right in front of us the whole time that we have yet to explain and discover. But what I'm being shown is that it's going to be explainable because of the missing elements. And by the way, this is a play on words. If you go back to the elements, it has to do with the fifth element. If you guys haven't seen that movie, spoiler alert, The Fifth Element's a really fun, soft disclosure type movie. And it's old, but it's an older movie. But essentially, she is the fifth element. She's the missing piece. We are the missing piece. And we are holding within us as superconductors, supercomputers in our own skin technology that are divinity embodied, essentially. We are creating this. That's a whole other multidimensional way of looking at it. So if I go back into this screen share, that which has been tightly wound together has been completely uplifted. This also has to do with secrets and information that was kept from us or that was kept under lock and key. And the much sketchy wisdom is being righted. So that's really important here because the sketchy wisdom has to do with everything. Disclosure, that which we've been told, that those theories, the scientific, let's start with science. And this is, by the way, my own perspective, not to say that all science theories are wrong, but there are some that have been theorized that are not accurate. And I'm not a scientist, but I'm just sharing what I see from my own perspective as a multidimensional being, because they're based on elements missing pieces. They're based on something that didn't have the whole picture. Now that these missing pieces of the puzzle are being discovered, because they couldn't be seen when we were the fourth element. Now we're the fifth, and we are like, oh, we took a step up, and now we can look back down and go, oh, well, what's this? This was lying there the whole time, but because I was not able to see it, my expansion is broadened, and these elements have now become available to us for us to see. And one could argue from a very multidimensional perspective that it's because we created them. Anyways, I'm really going for it here. So the sketchy wisdom has to do with what it is that we've been told, A, our reality is, B, what gravity is, C, what religion is, D, what politics are, E, what television is, all of it. All of it is sketchy wisdom because the wisdom was based on a fabricated reality. Everything's a fabricated reality, we could say. But my point is, it was fabricated in order to keep us in a certain frequency and vibration from completely understanding what's going on. And this is being righted. And if I go back to my share screen, there's a gathering and coming together, and many people are coming together to match wits. So it's like, okay, you know that this to be true. Here's what I know to be true. And they're going to actually work together. And this will help allow a certain frequency to raise that vibration and go in. It's like a meeting of wonderful minds. This also has to do with politics. This also has to do with everything. Doctors, everyone is working together. Is this going to happen tomorrow? Not necessarily, but it's already in the works. A storm front is brewing. A strong front, a strong storm is brewing. As the energies converge, as they build upon each other, there are many gathering forces to create a domination dominion. And I'm letting go of judgment about this message in the words, because as I read this, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. As I lead myself into knowing this, letting go of the judgment about the message in the words, as I lead myself into this space of higher knowing, I allow that which is not within my own free-flowing adventuranian adventure, radiant personality complex, to pick through different geometries, to pick through which one is most congruent with the messages that need to come through, as this is all micro to macro, social, physical, etc. Now, if I go back to the first portion of this message, I had to ask, is this literal? And I got a yes. So yeah, there's a storm that's brewing. It's stirring things up, but this also is a storm front. There's a false storm. There's something that's coming to push things out, a strong front. So it's like a pushback, right? A sense of pushing up against something. So this is literal and, as within, so without. As the energies converge, as they build up upon each other, there are many gathering forces to create a domination dominion. Now, I want to say that I talked about this before, about like a tsunami coming together, kind of doing this, pushing. And as they push, it moves up, splits, but then the center comes out like a lotus flower, and everything is kind of pulled together, back together again from one perspective. From another perspective, it's creating this mass space, but there's more that's able to bubble up. I'm getting goosebumps. That actually this needed to happen in order to get to the root, in order for the flower to come out to unite everything, the flower of life, so to speak, from one perspective. I get excited when I go into this. So if I go into that, what I didn't realize was dominion covers a lot of bases. And I've been writing about dominions probably for a couple of years now, and a couple of years. And if I go into dominion, I did not know. So let's go political just for a moment. I'll get that out of the way. I didn't know that there was a dominion voting system. Now, I thought this was interesting because if you look up the dominion, a friend just told me that, it says to define it, it's control or the exercise of control. Yet in the same sentence, it also says sovereignty. So I would think that that's not exactly, that's kind of a juxtaposition, right? Is that the right word? A dominion was one of the initially semi-independent countries. I'm getting this from Wikipedia. And later fully independent countries under the British Crown. Now I'm going to skip all of this. And it says it's a particular territory. Okay. It talks a lot about Britain as a whole, and it talks about all of this, but this isn't just the political dominion, which was interesting that this was what came up. So obviously this is symbolic, very symbolic of not only the voting, but also the true dominions. However, if I go back in and I hit, I'm going to show you, if I show you and I go into dominion, I'll just say it. It says lordship, sovereign or supreme authority. And it came from dominio. Now, I've been talking a lot about dominoes, and I've been seeing dominoes. And if I go to this, it says property or ownership, lord, master, from domus, which is house. Now, I found that very interesting because this is like the meaning from the 1650s, but where did that word come from? And essentially, when I go and I dig a little deeper here, are we on share screen? I think we are. And I look at this, oh no, we're not on share screen, sorry. I put that this was to create a domination, to create a dominion. So part of this is a front. It's not real. And part of this is real to stir things up with the elementals, to bring up something that's been hidden under the earth. And some of this is to create a new dominion. Now, if I look at dominion, it's countering each other. It's sovereignty and non-sovereignty, domination and sovereignty. Being sovereign is not being dominated by a particular entity. And that's what I'm seeing is this is actually letting this go. What isn't true? Well, I am sovereign, right? That's us regaining our sovereignty is what's happening right now. Although the storm front needs to happen in order to create this. And this also on the good note is a dominion, and I'll pause this just for a moment because this is what we're getting to the juice. So what I'm seeing is there's also domain. And if I go and look at domain, obviously we could look at a website. I mean, there's so much interchanging meanings here, but it has to do with territory. So what I'm seeing is this is all connected. And what also comes up, there's a magnetic domain that where atoms are aligned with one another and they point in the same direction. So if I play with this, this is it's to create a domination and dominion. And physics, a magnetic domain is a means of the atoms aligning with one another and pointing in the same direction. Now, obviously we've got this going on. So they're not pointing in the same direction in our social world. But in reality, we are aligning to the same direction, which is back to source, back to our original domain. So I'll come back to that. There's so many more layers there. I lost my spot. There it is. So the energies are converging. There are many gathering forces to create this. So there's one that's false, and then there's one that's the real dominion. And the dominion is that I see this as being our dominion, our sovereignty. And then I also said I allow what that is not within my own free-flowing Advent terranean. So it's my terrain, my adventures, my adventurous, free-flowing. I'm having an adventure by sharing in this energy. And I'm going to share screen again because I wrote down in my radium. And these are specific words that I had come through. So I'll share screen. And if I look up radium, I'll share that with you guys. Radium is a chemical element with the symbol Ra, which I always see as symbolic. Ra, the sun, which is also part of this. Ra and the sun, and of course the energy of Ra, and atomic number 88. Now, if you guys have ever seen my videos, I'm all about the 8s and the 4s. So this is double 8s, and it's then a highly symbolic number. It also says, I was just talking about the 5th element, it is the 6th element in the second group of the periodic table. This is all code, within code, within code. And anyways, it's silvery white. I see that as symbolic. It's highly radioactive, and it decays into radon gas. Now, I'll pause for a moment. Or maybe not, stop share. I'm not sure how to do that from this screen. I'm learning. Okay, I'm just going to go back to that recording because I could go to so many places with radium. Basically, it's stored by a huge facility by Niagara Falls outside of New York. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and I'm not a scientist, so I play with what it is that I'm guided to look at and play with. So it's my own radium, my own radioactivity. And so I'm plugging in to these different radio antenna channels as an antenna. And this also has to do with connecting with the sun and new elements of the earth. And that'll be something I'm sure that'll come up in future transmissions from myself, and maybe more will come to light on this. Now, if I just hit share screen, and I go back to this, radiant personality complex. There's a lot of different things that I'm using and bringing to the table, as everybody else has in their own personality complex. But I'm picking through these different geometries, sounds and frequencies, and seeing which one's most congruent with what needs to come through. Because there's a lot of stuff that comes through sometimes where I'm like, I don't know if I want to go there. And I wrote, I'm seeing a gathering of great minds and great leaders. I'm seeing a pushback happen, which we're seeing now, of shadow adversity. But I'm also seeing this being overwhelmed by the university in adversity. I see this as a play on words. Obviously, the universe, I'm seeing it as a reference to our coming together, because this adversity is the push that we needed to come together. Otherwise, we'd have been perfectly fine going our separate ways and not talking to each other. I disagree, you disagree, okay, it is what it is. But we have to come together, and this adversity is giving us this opportunity. This is also in the medical field. This is also in our basis of our universities, our learning, where we're learning from, what it is that we're learning. That which has been adversarially, and some of the words I make up, by the way, or combine different words, pressing against this unified matrix of star seeds, is coming apart at the seams. We have said this many times before, yet time is tricky in some cases. So while this has already happened time and time again, there have been rebuttals in other time mechanics that have pulled through and somehow managed to keep the time intruders away from the time crusaders, so to speak. Every time I say so to speak, it literally is like, it could be, this is just what I'm saying. There's different ways of looking at it. This is just one version, so to speak. It could be another version. So I'll just break this apart a little bit. The first part's pretty obvious. That's what's pressing against us. We're unified, but it's falling apart, whether it doesn't look like it because of the storm front, but it is. And my guides have said time is tricky in some cases. So while this has already happened time and time again, this has already happened. This, from my perspective, this ascension, this battle, we've already done this. We are embodiments of masters. We've already been through this time and time again. There were time wars. There were time travelers. I'm going multidimensional. Things that were not supposed to happen organically were put into this matrix and essentially created ripples in time. That it's just like the movie, what is it? All these movies, these Marvel comic movies, soft disclosure. Time Wars, Star Wars, a lot of this, you know, we're traveling at light speed. We're going back in space. A lot of people have heard about, is it Montauk? Is that a thing? Like, I think that had to do with time travel. Anyways, all of this is irrelevant. Bottom line is we've already been there, done that. But now we're out creating the time bandits. And that's, I'll get to that later. So if I review this briefly, it said, we have said this many times before. Time is tricky in some cases. So this has happened time and time again. Tricky is also a reference to, because that's a play on words, the trickster. Like you think it's one way, but it's really not. And that's another layer to all of this. There have been rebuttals and other time mechanics, right, that have pulled through and somehow managed to keep the time intruders away from the time crusaders. So from a very easy perspective, time travelers on both ends tried to fix things. The one group tried to mess things up. Maybe they had the best of intentions and they still screwed things up. Others didn't have the best intentions and did screw things up. And then there was a whole other group that came in and said, all right, we got to fix all of that. Stop messing with things. Let us get back to the organic, how this was supposed to be, and quit going in there and screwing things up. And so there were the crusaders, there were the warriors, there were the bandits, and they were kind of all doing different things from my perspective. And so what's happened is many of us have been there, done that, are doing it now, maybe from a multidimensional perspective. And so something would be created and then something that would get reversed and uncreated which would create ripples and all of these problems. And this is why oftentimes we see the Mandela effect, why certain events are different than what they really happen. So this happens. This is a real thing. All right. Let me hit share screen again. So somehow we've been able to keep a lot of the time crusaders away, safe. And we've won, but then things have happened to pull us back into this looping system. And I did a video with the Olympic rings, and I was seeing the Olympic rings as an example of the looping system. It would just go back and forth and back and forth. But I feel like that was kept this way on purpose so that multiple realities weren't screwed up, just a particular group of realities or loops, if that makes sense. Yet the play for power is over. And this is just a lot of plays on words. So the play for power is over. The play for power over time is over. The power play is over. It is time for the play that once held power over the unassuming to be over. It is coming to an end. It is coming to a close. Power is in the play. Let us play. So let's go backwards. Let's play. Let's create. Let's have fun. Because the power, I'm going backwards here. The power is in the play. It's in what we tell ourselves. It's in what we're acting out. It's in the rituals on the dark and the light side. So let us play. Let's have fun. And if we're creating from that space of fun and do no harm, we're out creating that which has been created to create imbalance and inorganic timelines. And so that's where the power is at, in our inner child, to be able to create. And then if I go back to the beginning, the play for power over time is over. And that's been a big thing. It's like people have been trying to keep us in this time loop, because then that means, because their time was up. And if they stayed in this time loop, they could keep reversing and controlling and creating from one perspective the reality that these beings wanted to create. Again, I'm not going and labeling, it just is a story. The power play is over. So this is like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to win. No, I'm going to win. And this will beat this person. That's coming to a close also. Doesn't look like it, but it is in the works because it's already happened. It is time for the play that once held power. So that is obviously the actors and the actresses. That's a whole other can of worms. The world stage that held the power through ritual and time mechanics over those that were not the unassuming, right? Not knowing what was going on. It's time for it to be over. It's coming to an end. And I was hearing take the last bow. It's coming to a close. It's closing out so that it can't be accessed anymore. And there are many or certain drawbacks, drawing back, that have created this hierarchical order. But we draw back to a previous time in which none of this was ever a consistency. It was never a consistent drawing pattern, if you will. It was merely a scribble in the dark. Now, this is pretty obvious, but to play on this, yeah, there's drawbacks. So certain things are going to happen that are drawbacks to us having this experience. However, we are creating as creators, as the artists, back. We're drawing, it has to do with Mach speed. It has to do with the draw on like to draw in power, we're drawing it back to us. We're magnetizing it to us. We're changing the speed, if that makes sense. And we're creating the drawing board. I mean, this is all a play on words. So there are many or certain drawbacks drawing back that have created this hierarchical order. Oh, so in reference to the hierarchical order, they kept redrawing and taking us back and pulling us in. However, we are creating to the previous time before this all existed. So here we are in physical form, and we're like, no, we're the creators. We are here now, and we came before all of this. So we know innately how to create beyond this false reality. Oh, I've got goosebumps. So we're drawing back to the land before time Time did not exist where we're from, so to speak. So here we are in bodies creating from real time, not that which we have been drawn into. The vortex, we are the energy around the vortex, not the little mini vortex that sucked everything in like a black hole. Okay, we're creating and bringing us now. And this never was a consistency where we are drawing back to. So it has to be, in order to create something, it has to be a consistent pattern. So the reason we're always seeing the same things played out, for example, on the media over and over and over again, and the same patterns and the same symbols and the same rituals, it creates a timestamp and it locks it in through geometry to basically lock us into a matrix of perception and reality from a higher perspective. And this is all from one perspective. So these rituals and symbols are needed in order to hold the power from one perspective, because those are the agreements that we have in this reality. But what happens is, before that was a thing, it didn't work that way. It did, but it was more organic. It wasn't. So now we're going back to, it was never consistent. It was never a consistent drawing pattern. It was just a scribble, a little scribble before it got into a scramble, right? Before it got into a nest of yuckiness. It was just a little scribble in the dark. And we're taking it back to that and saying, no, this isn't going to stick. Doesn't work anymore. Also, I do believe scribble is a play on words. It's so fun. I just have to laugh because if I just pop onto this briefly and I go to scribble, it leads me to doodle. And I wrote about Yankee Doodle. I wrote about doodles. I wrote about macaroni. That's a whole other video. But basically, if we look at doodles, it's talking about just silliness. But it's also has to do with not having a particular pattern. It's just a scribble, so it doesn't stick. It doesn't hold. Okay, so let's hit share screen again. Drawbacks, drawing back, scribble in the dark. So it was like not even seen. We have grown. We grow forces. We have grown forces, and we see, we foresee. So we're seeing ahead. We're seeing it before it's happening. And we're out, we're time travelers, not having to do this fake, fake is the wrong word. We are time travelers just now, having a thought, having a vision of the future, recognizing we can foresee the future because we're creating it now. So this is many different layers. So we can foresee it because we might be seeing it ahead of time through our own vision, through our own pineal gland, through our own third eye, through remote viewing, whatever we want to call it. But we are creating it. Therefore, we can foresee it because we are it, because we're growing in our force. I am the force. I am the Jedi. We share in the sea of adversity because we're all part of it. For in adversity and diversity, we grow. We convulse, pulse, converge, bulge, and divulge. We are bringing through this information in this bulge. We are pressing against that bubble of reality, unreality. So this is pretty obvious, but it's also talking about science. The bubbles, our reality is a bubble. Everything that's created, I kept seeing this pushing. So if you picture us in a bubble and we blow a bubble and we expand it out, and then we're creating a bubble inside of it, and that's holding a certain frequency, and we're able to be in both worlds, and we're pushing against the concepts, we're pushing against the energy, we're pushing against this, as my dear friend Candace said, this fog, right? It's like she could push it out, and that's what we're doing. We're birthing, right? We're growing and we're expanding, and it essentially is causing the universe to expand. It's causing it, this whole concept of the universe is going too fast and we're expanding and it's all going to contract. We're supposed to expand. It's infinite. Everything's always growing. And it's this concept of that we have to come, it's just not what we think it is. My friend Kat was mentioning the Truman Show, which is exactly what I was seeing. The Truman Show, you know, you think everything's bad, but in actuality, it was just a reality. It was just anyways, that's a whole other can of worms, so to speak. So I'm laughing because I looked up bulge just briefly, and what I had written was, we share in the sea of adversity, for we convulse, pulse, converge. This has to do with physics. This has to do with science. This has to do with this heartbeat. And we merge, we converge, we pulse. It's a moving, fluctuating, pushing and pulling. And in this bulge, we are pushing against that bubble of reality. So we're in this round space, this round protuberance, and we're pushing against it. We're inside of it. We've infiltrated the bubble from one perspective, and we're moving it out. I always talk about our heart space expanding, right? We're pushing against it. But in addition, if I were to play with this, interestingly enough, and it talks about a round swelling that distorts a flat surface. So it's distorting what is flat. It's moving. And so we're able to see, if you look at a curve, if you're at this end and you're flat, you can't see the other end. But if you curve it, you can see it. And this has to do with time, space, from one perspective, right? And so what I'm hearing is we're pushing through shadow mechanics. So these shadow mechanics, we are bulging out against this, and we're saying no more. And if I go to the word origin, it talks about a round swelling or protuberance that distorts a flat surface so we can see at each end. And this also says a temporary, unusual increase in number or size. So I see that star seed matrix. And also it somehow has something to do with budget. Imagine that. Bulging, it's a budget. This is what our budget is, and we're pushing through that. And then I'm also seeing there's something having to do with this in a military context. A piece of land that projects outwards from an otherwise regular line. So I know that this is very multi. It also has to do with wallet and budget. So it's a very multi-dimensional meaning. So much here. Okay. So if I go back into this space and, sorry, share screen. Where am I? Back to the dashboard. I was talking about when you have friends who get together and they cause problems, so they're being separated. So they're unable to cause the same problems that they used to because the ringleader has been pulled apart, is what I was seeing. So somebody's been separated from their ringleader. So we are writing time. Now I have another blog where I write about this. Right. Anyways, and it says we're being squeezed. Okay. So we are writing time, writing time. We are rewriting that which has been written. We are writing time waves. We are writing over this particular program that was created to miscreate, to create continuity in the screen, movie screen, to make real the unreal. Continuity, gravitational pull, a false gravity system. Now I'm going to stop right there and just start right here. We are riding it like waves, like we're horseback riders. We're riding it, and we're also, or I'm hearing like being on the back of a dolphin. We're also riding it because it was fake. It wasn't right. It was wrong from one perspective. So it was off balance is what I'm hearing. And my friend Kat was like, I kind of see it like a sailboat, you know, it was off keel, or its keel was off, or I don't know if I'm saying that right. It was on a pivot. So she was saying, I'm seeing it riding like a ship. And I was seeing that as well. and we're writing it like a program, like you would be a computer programmer or a script. Earlier, I was talking about something having to do with scripture and script. So we're writing this out. This is the correction to the program so that it all fits in this bigger bubble of existence that we're in. And we're pulling in all the pieces because before it was missing time. We were missing time. So we felt like we were being pushed into these short little segments, when in actuality, the segment is what it means is that's being apart from something else. It isn't fluid. And we are rewriting that which has been written. So things were written, but we're rewriting it. We're saying, sorry, that's not real. That actually was written to misinform us. And we're writing over it. We're telling you the truth. We're writing this out. These are time waves. And this writes over the particular program. So it rewrites it. Although it doesn't necessarily erase it, it just rewrites over it and fills in the gaps, is what I'm hearing. And this was created to keep us in those Olympic loops, so to speak, always running, always relaying, always looping around, and we go over here and then we loop back over here. This was created to create continuity in the screen. So first I put just continuity, but it was creating continuity in the green screen, in the screen that we were viewing as our reality, in the false reality. It had to create this to make it look a certain way. And I put obviously the movie screen to make real, like the reel on a film. If you cut out pieces and you don't put them together, the film doesn't make sense. And that makes real the unreal so that we believe it. Now I moved on to say continuity again, gravitational pull, a false gravity system. Now this is something I'm going to just keep going. The false gravity system created this false system in general, or they were intricately interwoven in the same storyboard. And when I put story, I wrote board afterwards because it's like a motherboard. You know, it's like a computer. And that motherboard, where if you put a story together, you put certain pictures, and that creates your storyboard before you write the story. So it's like it was part of this reality. And it created a false system in general. And I'm not going to go into the huge thing about false gravity system because that's not something I fully understand. But I've been getting a lot of messages about this for a really long time. Gravity isn't real. Other people I've heard actually also talk about that. I believe, well, I'll get to that later. So that we could go into a whole other video. Again, that's something I'll have to put together pieces to kind of explain what that means. Does that mean, and again, I'm not saying we're just going to all start floating around. All I'm saying is that there's some concept about gravity and how it works that isn't real. My husband, I told him this like a while ago, and I said, babe, gravity, what if gravity wasn't real? And he just looks at me, holds his cup, and just drops it. It's plastic, so it didn't break, but he just boof. Oh yeah, what was that then, Carrie? And I was like, no, you're missing my point. And I don't know how to articulate this other than how I'm articulating it in this. But again, it's that some people are going to butt up against you and go, you're wrong. You're not a scientist. You don't know what you're talking about. And from that perspective, they're right. But from a multidimensional perspective, we all understand this. We are all scientists. All of the information we're getting information from is the source behind the source that we're all connected into. All it's coming through is our filtered reality, our filtered perception, our filtered perceptions of reality, and our own conceptual design. Some people are mathematically inclined. Some people are physics, which includes mathematics. Some people are more about shapes and chemicals. So this again is those witty personalities coming together, right, to outwit the old story. And what happens is I'm just offering from my perspective what's coming through. And what's coming through is this gravity isn't real. But there's also play on words. So it's real, but it's not real. So meaning there's something that we're missing here about what it is and about why it was created the way that it was created. And that maybe will be coming out soon. When I say soon, does that mean this year? I don't know. It might mean in the next 2 years. Might mean in the next 2 months. But it's coming out from my perspective. Okay. And I know this has to do with science. I know that there's a lot of physics involved, and maybe somebody out there will go, oh, maybe she's talking about this. Or I know people are probably going to go, okay, this is nuts. Gravity is real. And from one perspective, it is, but it isn't what we think it is. That's all I'm trying to say. So when I say it isn't real, it's just like when we hear about what's going on and how politics are created, that isn't real. Yes, it's real. We have taxes that we pay, and we have jobs, and we have rules that we have to follow. Those are real. But what their foundation and what they're based out of are not real. There's missing elements that are embedded in as part of a program to create a false system in which we believe in so much that we have made it a reality. I'm going multidimensional here. Whew, a little bit, almost done. So this false gravity system, ring around the rose, ring around the rosy. So we all fall down. So it's like keeping us down. This idea and this concept of what we've built our reality, it's keeping us down. And it's that ring around the rose. It keeps us going in circles. I think rosy is probably something that I'm missing, and I'll have to come back and play with the meaning on that. But the real ring around the rose is implosion, and our ability to be in a implosion in a good way in this fractal reality. It means us being in coherence would be the easiest way to say. So what my guides are saying is this inverted system has been corrected. It is correcting itself because it's a living, breathing source is living and breathing as well. We are cells in the source structure. So it's being corrected because it's correcting itself, because that's how organic evolution, if you want to call it that, or expansion works. But we're assisting in that process. For that which has fallen has yet to be reborn again. This goes back to the whole beginning, going back to writing time, the scribble in the dark. It hasn't been born again yet. It's fallen, and it hasn't gone back into the process of being recreated, and it doesn't have to, because we've already now experienced this so many times from one perspective. We don't need to create it again. So it has yet to be reborn again. It's not going to be reborn again unless we choose for it to. For all is impermanent. All is infinite in its impermeations. And I know that's a play on words. It's a portmanteau. All is nothing is permanent in the physical form, yet all is infinite in the impermanence. So the fact that nothing is permanent, but it's really infinite. So it's always, so it is permanent, but it's always changing infinitely. Everything is changing and fluxing, and that is the way it is. The hard mechanical system could not sustain itself. And in an unsustainable reality system, it then creates a false trapping system. So again, it sucks things into it, that vortex. This has been pulled apart because many of the beings that were holding it together, that were stuck like glue, they actually were stuck like glue. It's like they couldn't be apart from each other. They had to work together because that was the only way the system would stay together. And if they were separate, then it wouldn't, the green screen, it wouldn't balance that out. And they are no longer together anymore. They are no longer keeping it together. Like, they can't keep it together. They're losing their marbles, but also they're not together anymore. Some have been removed from this reality. They're no longer staying together. Some are choosing not to be a part of it because they're taking back their own sovereignty. And they're really confused. They're all looking at each other like, what do we do now? They're trying to band together in a network of disinformation. This is a false sense of continuity and is countenance. Now, this also has to do with continence. Now, trying to band together in a network of disinformation seems pretty obvious. But what they're doing is this is actually creating their own sense of security. They think if we keep everybody misinformed and we give them this false information, that's going to keep our plan together and it'll buy us more time. And that's a false sense of continuity. It isn't working. Now I'm going to pause just for a moment. So that's even a play on words. So just going through this, it says it's a false sense of countenance, a false sense of continuity, and is countenance. Now, countenance is, if I look up the definition, specifically an expression on a person's face is one version, but I really like the fact that it's talking about the outward appearance and looks. So basically, it's giving it an outward appearance of continuity. This is also a reflection of false security. So this is a reflection inner to outer. So they are reflecting the fact they have to do this disinformation for them to feel secure in their own story. This was saying this is the way. Oops, I forgot to screen share. Sorry. Not that it really matters, but so this is also a reflection of false security. This was saying this is the way. So that's the way it was. Things have to be this way. This is the way things are. This is the structure. But this was never true. So this false sense of continuity has continued to degrade the human species. It was a degradation of force that was mechanically woven in the chain. And I wrote down DNA and protein chains. So a lot of this junk DNA, the fact that our brain left and right hemispheres don't connect, all of this was woven into the species from one perspective to keep us in this false sense of continuity, to think that everything was continuous and that this is the way things work. And I'm sure there's more layers to that, but we move into this form of communication because this is something that will be coming up in future transmissions. For the changes that are upon us will be difficult for some to bear, will be difficult for some to bear witness to. Many have already come to pass. So that's obvious. Many are not, they're choosing to leave. They're like, I'm checking out, I'm done. I don't want to look at this. I don't want to see it. But those that are here, we are bearing witness to it. For some reason, we have to see it. Many people have to see it to believe that it wasn't true, if that makes sense. And that's part of the awakening that helps to dissolve the old reality. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. When they get to the Emerald City, and they see the person behind the screen, they see it and they go, that's what this was all about. And that is the part of the mass awakening. And there are those of us that see it in our own way, right? But there are many that need to see it from one perspective. We don't have to, but we need to see it somehow to dissolve it, because then it's not hidden. There's no magic. The magic is dissolved. There are many who are currently being overlooked currently. Yet there are many who are being overlooked currently. For the chain of events that are about to rock this world are yet to be deciphered. Now, this is a part I have yet to decipher, so to speak. So that tells me this is all a code, so to speak. The chain of events that are about to rock this world. Could it be? I don't like to predict earthquakes and things like that, because that's what some people say. I feel like this has more to do, granted, when we shift, the earth shifts and vice versa. So are there going to be changes in the earth? Absolutely. But part of this, I was seeing it as a pendulum, a rock, and I was hearing rockabye, like goodbye in one sense to the old, right? And also I was seeing it as it's all going to be okay. I was hearing everything's going to be all right. It's all going to be okay. But also, I think this has to do with our concept of reality. Like, holy moly, this is not real. If this main piece of information isn't real and this is false, what else is false and what is really real? I mean, can you imagine the people that are so ingrained in a particular reality and just one piece of information rocks their world to where everything is just like, well, what's real? And then it has yet to be deciphered. So that's a big little paragraph. And so for me, that is deciphered, decoded. Also, I've been told that a lot of what I write is written in a mathematical format and a code, which I have yet to figure out, or I know it's in an anagram or things like that. So that's something I've not taken the time to sit down and play with. And this is also having to do with a lot of other people's information that comes through in code. If I do just a quick share screen and I go into the Wiktionary, let me see if I can make this bigger. Maybe I can't. Sorry, guys, that's as big as it gets. Now I can't. Okay. But basically this says it's interweaving letters. So this has yet to be deciphered. So I look up cipher and it's a combination of, or interweaving of letters. So I'm going to stop share just because you can't see it anyways, it's so small. But essentially it talks about an engraver cipher, a method of transforming text in order to conceal its meaning. So if I go back to where I read that, for the chain of events that are about to rock this world have yet to be deciphered. So there's things that we don't know of what we know what's going to happen, but we're in the process of essentially decoding it, right? So it talks about music, a fault in an organ valve, which causes a pipe to sound continuously without the key having been pressed. It's just fun to kind of look at this. It just a grouping of 3 digits in a number, especially when delimited by commas or periods. So I'm pretty sure it says a number having 5 ciphers of zeros, for example. So this brings me back to the ones and zeros, which I talk about next. So I like this too because it talks about so a method of transforming a text in order to conceal its meaning. And cryptography, it uses an algorithm that converts letters or a sequence of bits into ciphertext. Now, I think that's so symbolic, and this in a nutshell of really what's going on. Not only what I've written, but the algorithms in major computer systems, there might be some big revealing that's through this dominion or other domains in the computer world that then help that are still in the process of being decoded. Like the information's there, we just have to decode it, and that's in the process of being decoded. I also wrote about this in the following because this has to do with the I forgot about the animal. Mugrat? No, I'll go to that in just a minute. So that's a huge clue as to kind of what's going on. All right. I'm going to finish on this note. I'm going to do one last share screen. You guys have made it this far. Nice job. I would be shocked. For the chain of, so I was seeing a third rock from the sun. I think it has to do again with gravity. It has to do with the Christed consciousness. It has to do with, I was seeing the rock eater from Neverending Story and a rocky motion. So this is all part of the code to decode the code. It's the never-ending story. It's the story. So that's a whole other ball of wax. And so we use this mechanics and frameworks, frame words to play with the words, to line up to certain efficiencies, efficient meanings for the words and the codes that are hidden behind the depths of the knowingness, are used at this point to access a deeper, expansive range of motion. This is all science, and this is something that I'm not going to go into. Maybe I'll go into it at a later date, but it's all science. Efficiencies is a science. Codes is part of this supercomputer. Mechanics and frameworks have to do with algorithms. The hidden behind the depths of the knowingness, remember from the Neverending Story, the nothing? What I was shown, if you haven't seen that movie, soft disclosure, what I was shown was let's say the nothing. It was this reality that was eating itself. And this is it for a previous video. And then I was shown the light, another reality that was created to balance out what was eating itself. So when the light comes in, let's say this is the dark matrix and this is the light matrix. One could not exist without the other. And I saw the light absorbing, integrating with the dark. And then that stabilizes the dark from destroying itself and everything on it and in it. And then the light counteracts it and then it expands. Or the light comes in like the bubble and then pulls it up so that all that can be salvaged gets pulled up with it. I mean, there's so many different, I have goosebumps. so many different visions that I was seeing, and I'll be talking about this again and again. So maybe I'll break that down at some point. It talks about, so as we work through this means, they're working through the golden means, a new meaning, a new way of accessing, working through the mathematics, the golden spiral, the true ring around the rose. Whew, I'm going to pause. So I'm going to try to finish this up, and I'm going to just share screen briefly, because this is a lot. It's fun, but I'm like, oh, this is a lot of information. So I'll go through and read the next. I'm screen sharing. I'll go in. So I'm at we're now entering a new hypothecary. I didn't know that was a real word. I spelled it wrong. A new hypothecary. Now, hypothecary, if I go through and I look at this, and again, I don't know if I can make that bigger. Oh, I can. Talks about the pledging of property or mortgage as surety for a loan. But more importantly, it's a pledge. And if I go into apothecary, which I didn't really understand what the meaning was in reference to this, it says it's to put a place where things are put away. All right, it's a place where things are put away, and a mix with hypothesis, which is a new knowledge, a new theory, right? Putting away this new theory, this or not new theory, putting away, storing this hypothesis. I see that as part of the play on words, but I also see this as the pledge of property or mortgage is surety for loan. So we're coming into a new pledge, okay? We're coming into a new acknowledgement of a debt. That's an interesting, if I look at that, it's an acknowledgement of a debt. So we are now entering into a new hypothecary. So I could go on to this. I won't go into too much, but it's a new stage of events, the turning of tides, the turning of events, the changing of tides. And of course, we've seen a lot of changes just in the last few weeks. The changeover involves a mass consciousness propaganda awakening. And for those that are destabilizing the current grid system, there is a transmission of thought, and that's all a play on words, a transition of thought. So there's a transmission, but there's also a change about it. So that's all code, obviously, and I know part of this was to break down the code, but I think that's pretty obvious as to what that means. There is a deeper layer of meaning. There is a deeper layer of knowing and meaning. So the deeper layer of knowing and meaning is giving birth right now. And those that would change unionship, this boat, take it off course, put it on out of balance, right? As my friend Kat said, we're writing it. It would take it, it would change it. It would create change the unionship of the divine hierarchy, not the hierarchy that we've had in the false system, but the divine higher arc and the key. And this has to do with creation and everything else, divinity. The divine order of how things are should be versus the inorganic order that was created for mass propaganda propagation. There is a higher calling that is coming up and rippling through the bedrock. Again, rocking this world. Again, the elements, the elementals, right? It's coming up from the earth. Maybe it has something to do with inner earth. Ooh, that could be fun. And I'm hearing again, everything's gonna be all right, right? That 90s song, I know that was way off, but you get my point. This may be confusing for some. For some, have put all their chips into one basket, so to speak. Think about the people that have all been so hopeful about one particular outcome and vice versa. Or they really, so this is confusing. They're thinking, what happened? I thought this was going to happen, but that's not what's happening. As the chips fall, those that were the recall. So I put, this is about remembering. So those that were, so the chips fall, and those that were, they're going to be recalled. This doesn't necessarily have to do, by the way, with what's going on in the political world. This also has to do with remembering the truth, remembering people, remembering what was really before all of this. But it's also the great recall. Things are going to be brought up and they're going to be called out, and it's going to be like, wait a minute, that's not real. So we're going to take that out. This product is not real. We're going to take that back because it's not helping people. So on and so forth. So I'm calling it the Great Recall. Oh, that's probably what I should have titled this. And I wrote ticking time bombs. So there's stuff that was only able to work for a certain period of time before it exploded, like Inspector Gadget. If you've ever seen that, it's like this message will self-destruct in 20,000 years. So now we're at that point, and it's like it was meant to self-destruct, but now we're recalling it, taking it back and saying, no, that's not how it's going to happen. This all sounds worrisome, and yet there is nothing that cannot be handled. This is nothing that cannot be accepted. For as people come to accept this as part of the reality that has been overlooked by many, it's been here the whole time. We just haven't been looking at it because we couldn't see it. There will be a mass understanding. Many will say, no wonder why, fill in the blanks. No wonder why I had this happen in my life. No wonder why this person said that. No wonder why. The rippling of ahas that will ripple out after the shock is permeated will be so massive that no stone is left unturned. And I put this as a common theme. Could it be, again, changes in the earth? Very possible. So it could bring up a lot of things. The diamond in the rock. This is a difficult subject, in part because there is a linearization, a part of the framework in which we are communicating within. There are timeline aspects that are being tapped into. There are political and social aspects. Yet on a bigger scale, this is quantum. It is a quantum whole in one. This has to do with scale and harmonics, by the way. This has to do with balances and measures. This has to do with geometry. That's what the scale is all about. It has to do with balancing balance, again, micro to macro, the body, the earth, science, politics, economics, whole in one. It's always been a play on words with a lot of the things that I've written. There is a force field in all of this. The forced field has been let down, meaning it's not, the force field isn't up anymore. And that which has been forced upon the masses is lightening its load. People have been pushing against this pressure, carrying the weight of this force field on them, forced into certain actions and participations, and this has been lifted. So some are left going, what do I do now? Now, this is a play on words too, because this means I was seeing that people are trying so hard to keep the false reality up that they aren't able to keep an eye on everything. So there are those people that have been under someone's thumb through fill in the blanks. They've been under someone's thumb. They haven't been able to speak their truth. They haven't been able to do what they really want to do. And now this pressure is lifted because the distraction is so, it's requiring so much energy that all of the energy is being pushed towards that. And over the course of this next year, that's been lifted. So some people are going to go, what do I do now? Others are going to be like, I can leave. You know, it's giving more options, and it feels better for some, not everybody. Some are going to be feeling, what do I do now? Why am I feeling this way? This is part of the awakening process for this group of people. So not everyone. There is a code of arms that has been lifted, so to speak. And if you look at a coat of arms, this is a play on words. It's a code of a particular group. It's also a coat of arms, like literally a symbol. And somehow one of these symbols or multiple symbols that have been keeping a symbol of domination over, it's been lifted. It's also playing out in a critical display. There are many factions to be pieced together. Now, this has to do with facts and groups that need to come together. we invite you to play with the words, the word tribes, if you will. Trining, twinning together in a certain interlocking patterns that create a referential referee, referencing, refencing. Also, I was seeing ferencing, like energy, a kind of grouping together. So if I go back and I look at this, there's probably some mathematical stuff that fits things into certain compartments that I'm probably not going to take the time to do right now. So if anybody knows Dan Winters, wants to set us up so we can play with this and he can tell me what this all means, awesome. Maybe John wants to. I would love to interview Dan Winters. That would be so much fun. A referral system, by the way, if you haven't watched him, fractalfield.com, he talks about a lot of the stuff that I write about and brings it into understandable format, kind of. So he's an electrical engineer, scientist. I think he's a psychiatrist as well, or psychologist. A referencing, refencing referral system in which you can band together in certain word patterns. And as you band together these synchronistic word patterns, you will see a synchronistic patterning coming up. And beneath this layer is a deep, deep, deep understanding of the physics of things, of the quantumness of it all, how it's all interconnected, how our language is interconnected, how the sound, how the geometries, how the social economic world stage is connected to the micro, to the macro, to the cosmos. For if there's a program that is all is written from, so to speak, then there would be a baseline frequency in which all of the attachments and connections that are plugged into this baseline creative aspect would tap into. So it's almost like the storehouse of all the electrical current, right? It's the motherboard. So I was shown again the dark, the light. So pretend that you're in a void space and there's this world of darkness. And then there's this world of light. And they combine what I showed you earlier. Well, where did that come from? Those were created from somewhere. They didn't just come out of nothing, or they did, the nothing. They formed. So we're looking at the energy behind what created that. That's the baseline frequency. Where did that come from? Which we can all tap into. The deeper hum. This deeper communication is where this information is humming from. Yet, this is merely the deepest layer of this particular matrix. So you got these two matrices, then you've got the space where the matrix came from, but where's that coming from? So there are deeper layers, more of course, than this particular communication. This is just one layer. We are in a space of communicating about or from a particular matrix theory. For in this dominion matrix, there is a deeper underlying reference of the mechanics of reality. This is the mechanics of the reality that is in the process of re-emerging, yet also reinventing itself. So the other realities no longer were accessible. Let's talk about time travel. So let's just break that down really quick. This dominion has a certain mechanical way of that it's worked, right? The mechanics. It's in the process of emerging, expanding, yet reinventing itself. It's being rewritten. Okay, so the other realities no longer were accessible. So partly because the other realities weren't accessible, because we weren't vibrating high enough to access them, or we were locked into this particular belief reality matrix to keep us from accessing these higher realities so that this one would not move. Or also, the other realities no longer were accessible. So those other realities, because of the timeline wars, weren't accessible. But we're in the process of recreating that so that they can be accessible, erasing that, not erasing it, reinventing it. And we weren't in the long wave. And again, I'm referencing Dan Winter. I didn't know what that was until I found him. Not the artist, the scientist. He talks about the long wave and heart coherence. We weren't vibrating in a consistent, we were more of a scribble in a consistent pattern that could keep us moving into that higher space. But we were not in the spectrum, divots, and that's something I'm just not going to go into right now, but we were not in the cohesive space. Oh, well, I guess I will. Divots, if you think of divots on a golf ball, we weren't in the spaces that helps the golf ball travel faster. And it also, so speed, we weren't going fast enough. We were not in the cohesive space to tap into it. I am tapping into something, we were all tapping into it, that was created in the beginning to assist in countering the inverted matrix from one perspective. And it was written based off of the inverted space. I talk about that. The light that came in to absorb this was created to balance this. Therefore, it had to have certain elements that could connect the two. Therefore, the light has the same structure or puzzle pieces created in order to fit with the dark, in order to absorb it. Otherwise, it would just do this. It couldn't type, these bandwidths would just not connect. It had such goosebumps everywhere. It had to drop down into the lower bandwidth. And certain truths were told so that we could raise our frequency almost the other end to help balance and find that balance, that combination of the two. So one might say that this other program, modality, methodology, is not necessarily as deep as we could go. So it isn't. Technically, the light isn't the all. It's only created on purpose to balance that out. And this is one perspective, by the way, to counter the false. So so it's not necessarily as deep as we could go, for it was also a false reality system. Whew. So the truths that we've been told, even in the light worker community, were based off of a false system that was created to balance out the false system because they had to play together. And I put, like, when a bug is in a computer and a program iOS created to overwrite it. So again, that false system, it's like this was created to out falsify this one so that they could harmonize and play together in the false matrix. I'm just going to pause just for a moment. I'm almost done here. So I put in here that, so it was created to counter the false reality system. So it's when you have a bug in a computer and a program is created to overwrite it. Now I put a program is created to overwrite it, but I accidentally put iOS. And then I realized I didn't accidentally put iOS because iOS is a computer system that was created from this particular reality. Apple, right? And Apple has to do with the toroidal field, the toroidal spin, the apple of the heart, the apple of the eye. It has to do with the golden means. So this is all connected to that somehow. But in addition, we could even go back further and say it's the internet domain name for British Indian Ocean Territory. It also, so we were talking about territories earlier, and Britain. And then also talks about, in Greek mythology, it's also one of the 4 brightest satellites of Jupiter. It says satellites. I wonder if they mean stars or moons. I don't know. But anyways, and it talks about, so I'm just sharing, that's a whole other spin. I could go into so much because it's all multidimensional. It talks about belonging to. So there's so much that we could go into with this and just play just from that in itself, iOS, right? It's used to form property and characteristics. I mean, to form property and characteristics, right? So it's just fun. So it's created, right, And we're beginning to share with you so many, oh wait, I guess I didn't share screen, almost done. To understand all of the false evidence appearing real, not just fear, but yes, fear. We are beginning to share with you so you may begin to understand all of the false evidence appearing real. It's also so that we understand the false evidence. Like, oh, that looked real because we were told it was real, but now it's false. And this was also to understand what created all the fear. This has been created in order to stabilize a particular grid length. Now, my friend Kat, I guess I have so much more here. I think I'm going to have to do part 2. I can't keep going. I'm done. I really wanted to get to Wombat. I really wanted to get to the football field, but now we're getting into time and illusions on time. And quite frankly, I am out of time on this. So I'm going to call this video number 1. If you've made it this far, holy moly. This is fun, you guys, for me. And so thank you for tapping into this energy with me. And again, to get to the juice, the second portion of the blog, we will start next time talking about the egg being cracked. We'll talk about the false matrix. We'll talk about cracking the code. We'll talk about this iOS program and the fields that are being scrambled, because now we're getting to the juice. And it took me this long to get here, but the second part is my favorite. So I'm just going to end on that note and send you guys a big thank you for tuning in. And again, if anybody knows Dan Winters, give him a shout out. Let's hook up. I'd love to play and have his perspective on all of this. In love and light, guys. So grateful. Namaste. Have fun creating. Oops.